As different as we all are individually, what brings us together here in this room today is that we're committed to doing good. Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. My name is Frank, and along with my colleagues Molham, Erica, and Hai Young, today we're going to present to you our case on PEMKO. PEMKO's brief history is going to touch upon its founder, Robert J. Handy, who started the company and really envisioned the values and core principles of responsibility, courage, and integrity. It's under these core values that we're here for our objective, which is to create and present a comprehensive and creative corporate social responsibility plan that truly leverages PEMKO's core values and the Founding Fathers' legacy. PEMKO quickly built its products from simply offering property and casualty insurance into a firm that had a network built of 520 employees and 114 independent agents. Now, PEMKO operates in a very difficult regulatory environment where its products are treated as a commodity, and because as such, smaller firms are price takers and not price makers. What this means is that customers don't really seek out these products. Now, it makes it tough because as well, financial institutions normally have a tough time really building trust with the community members. Now, community members fail to see the real value behind some financial instruments and services that are provided. And that's really why it takes a hard time, and normally they only conform due to statutory law. So how do we bridge this trust? Now, CSR originally and traditionally has been the answer to the question. However, how CSR has been traditionally employed is that a manager will seek a CSR initiative, will implement it, but then fail to really align it with employee interests. What this means is employee interests aren't really brought in and they fail to create buy-in. And because there isn't employee buy-in, the CSR initiative fails. And that's why we're here today. We have a new CSR strategy for PEMKO. One that's really going to flow through the company, from the top, through the employees and into the community, to leverage all the resources and really build on adding to the core values, to improving PEMKO's business practices, and to really improve brand equity. It's really important throughout this presentation that we remember that we have to really keep the value chain intact from beginning to end, include all stakeholders, and make sure that we're leading with a financial institution that has heart.
So before PEMKO can implement a successful new CSR strategy, there's some considerations that it must address first. So let's start with brand equity. So PEMKO should ask itself, is our new CSR strategy, is it going to increase our brand equity? And more importantly, what kinds of returns will it provide? Moving on to market share, PEMKO currently holds 4% market share in Washington State, as well as a 0.14% national market share. So the question becomes, what will be the breadth and the depth of its new CSR initiatives? And more importantly, is it scalable? Will the new CSR strategy grow along with PEMKO's growth? And last but not least, budget and financial constraints. Traditionally, PEMKO has donated 5% of its surplus revenues to local causes. So how can PEMKO ensure and guarantee consistent CSR efforts year after year independently of earnings? Before we can begin to answer these questions, it's important to know the current CSR situation at PEMKO. So there's three main activities that PEMKO is currently engaged in. Number one is PEMKO provides its employees with 8 hours of paid volunteer time called the Your 8 program. Number two, PEMKO currently sponsors monthly employee charity drives. And number three, as previously mentioned, they donate 5% of their surplus revenues. It's also important to note that PEMKO already has a very strong branding campaign. For example, their little trading card profiles, and we should leverage those resources when formulating our new CSR strategy. And so, taking everything we have just outlined into account, our team has identified 3 key areas in which PEMKO can improve its CSR strategy. Number one is that PEMKO currently doesn't have a solid infrastructure for its CSR strategy. So there's no liaison or division that officially oversees all these CSR practices. Number two is sustainability has not been deeply embedded into PEMKO's culture. There's a fundamental disconnect between causes that employees truly care about and the causes that PEMKO is directly contributing to. And lastly but not least, PEMKO's current CSR strategy is simply unsustainable. There are no tangible metrics to evaluate impact, and more importantly, there's no institutional memory. So how should PEMKO go about solving these problems?
Introducing PEMKO Cares, PEMKO's new and improved CSR arm, the brand, the umbrella under which all CSR activities take place. This is a solution to CSR at PEMKO moving forward. Now, PEMKO's CSR, PEMKO Cares plan is threefold. Right? One, it's giving a structure to PEMKO. So what PEMKO Cares is, it is a branded structure that takes care of all of CSR at PEMKO. It is made up, we want to emphasize, of the current team that handles CSR, so a CSR manager and her support staff. Right? And along with that, we've created a redefined mission statement along with a guide map, and we'll delve deeper into that further in the presentation. Two, we're creating a deep culture of sustainability at PEMKO, and we'll do that in a number of different ways. One, we want to create a courage rewards program where we can incentivize employees to raise issues that are hyperlocal in their communities and bring them to PEMKO Cares and engage with them. So we're creating a rewards program. Okay. Second, we want to really emphasize the personality traits of being nurturing, refreshing, neighborly, and unpretentious into the lives of employees. And we'll do that through training and workshops that we'll be implementing. And then thirdly, we want to, in order to create a long-term sustainable culture of sustainability, we really need to integrate CSR into the recruitment process for employees. I think that's really important. So the third part of our solution is then creating a sustainable initiatives program. And this program will allow us to source hyperlocal problems and then determine which hyperlocal problems to pursue, how to pursue them, where to pursue them, and how to measure the impact that we leave through every initiative, right? So you might be wondering right now where our focus is. So PEMKO Care's focus particularly is to build communities from the bottom up, right? That's what we aim to do. So to maximize our impact, we're not state-oriented, we're not city-oriented, particularly we're hyper-locally oriented. That's what we want to do. So this takes us to our mission statement, right? What we've done is we've taken the current CSR mission statement and we've redeveloped it, we've built upon it based on current values at PEMKO. So essentially what we strive to do is to improve the quality of life in the communities that we serve with integrity, responsibility, and courage. That's who we are, and that's what we plan to do. Now you're wondering, how does this all work, right? So let's take a closer look at the CSR guide map right here. At the heart of CSR at PEMKO is PEMKO Cares, right? This is the current CSR manager along with her staff. Now, they incentivize employees to raise hyperlocal issues, right? So the hyperlocal issues are raised by an employee, and he or she brings them to PEMKO Cares. They then together create an initiative to tackle that hyperlocal problem in a hyperlocal community. Right? And then at their disposal, PEMKO Cares has $12 million in funding and 4,160 hours of employee hours at their disposal that they can draw from towards that initiative as needed. Now, but you're wondering, can every problem then be directed into an initiative? How do we decide which problems become initiatives and which problems don't? And that takes us to the specific initiatives framework, right? This is a three-step sustainable initiatives framework that we implemented. So 1, identify, 2, implement, and 3, evaluate. So first, what we do is we identify hyperlocal problems, right? We then identify the scope of the problem, and we ask ourselves, do we have the necessary resources to tackle this problem? And if the answer is yes, we then create measurable goals before we go into the implementation phase. Step 2, we go into the implementation phase, we implement the solution. We ask ourselves, which and how much of the resources that we have do we want to direct towards this initiative? And then we execute accordingly. Thirdly, we evaluate. So based on our metrics, we ask ourselves, based on our predetermined metrics, how successful have we been? And if not, if we haven't been as successful as we want it to be, why and how can we improve upon that? And that takes us to our case study.
Thank you, Molim. So using the case study, using the PEMKO Cares framework, we'll now go through the 3 steps of our strategy: identify, implement, and evaluate, using a case study example. So step 1, identify. About 2 weeks ago, Washington's OSPI released data that says a large amount of Washington students were being chronically absent. Now, assuming that this is a problem that a PEMCO employee brings to PEMCO, we will first need to signify, is this a significant problem? If so, what is the scope and the extent of this problem? Well, empirical research shows that chronic absenteeism is one of the earliest indicators that determine whether a student will graduate high school and or college. And last year, 1 out of 6 Washington students were chronically absent for 18 days. That's 10% of the entire school year, and these are 174,000 students. Also, these students are generally from students of color, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and students with disabilities. With these factors in mind, we go on to step 2, implement solution. Again, keeping PEMCO's brand values in mind, a proposed solution to this case study problem would be, perhaps, a success mentorship program. Because so many of these students are coming from low socioeconomic class, their parents may not specify the importance and value of education. Furthermore, if you look more deeply into the chronic causes of absenteeism, you can see that a lot of these students are absent because they just don't have that deep, meaningful relationship with school adults. So, by pairing off a PEMCO employee with one of these students would ensure that these students have the access to a positive adult figure in their lives. Last but not least, evaluate results. We cannot stress enough the importance of metrics even before the implementation of any program. Because without measurable metrics, it would be hard to signify PEMCO's impact in the communities. So one example metric that we could potentially use for this case study of absenteeism could be comparing the number of absence of these students before and after the mentorship program, and how that number compares to the district average.
Thank you, Hayoung, for walking us through the potential that PEMCO Cares can make. So where do we go from here? How do we make a real measurable impact? So our team came together and brainstormed a list of some other hyperlocal problems that employees may raise. So just to give you an example off the list, in Grays Harbor, Washington, in 1988, there was an oil spill about 110 miles off the coast, and to date, 28 years later, there's still no defined emergency response plan. PEMCO Cares can go in there, give the community the resources they need to form that plan. Another example off the list, in Franklin, Washington. So Franklin, Washington is an agriculture-based county, and its farmers have actually recently joined into something called the Washington Voluntary Stewardship Program. Basically allows farmers to write their own environmental regulations. So what PEMCO Cares can do there is they can set up a pen pal platform that connects farmers in Franklin County to farmers in other counties that wish to achieve the same goals. So beyond just our framework, we also consider the other implications of our program. So to start off with brand equity, PEMCO Cares will increase brand equity because it will bring together all shareholders behind one common cause. Additionally, we hope and we strive for PEMCO Cares to become synonymous with hyperlocal community problem solving. Number 2, market share implications. We asked ourselves in the beginning, how can we make a scalable strategy? So our strategy is scalable because with our institutional memory database, new communities with new problems will now have a point of reference. And last but not least, our budget and financial constraints. So based off of our estimates for the example case study that Hayoung walked us through, we actually estimate that there will be a trifold benefit to the community, the students, and PEMCO itself worth $80 million.
So let's drive this home. What have we accomplished today? What we've accomplished today is what you've asked us. You've asked us to create a comprehensive and creative CSR plan that leverages PEMCO's brand values. What we've given you is PEMCO Cares. PEMCO Cares is the brand and structure that PEMCO needs. It promotes a culture of sustainability at PEMCO, and it provides a framework that we can use to tackle problems and achieve tangible results. What it really all comes down to, right, is people want to feel cared for. And that's what we're giving them. We're telling them, PEMCO cares. That's who we are. That's what we do. Because we're a lot like you.
A little different.
Thank you for your time.
You guys did a great job of identifying key stakeholders in the beginning of the presentation. And and with that, you did an excellent job of kind of going deeper on that employee engagement side. Was there any consideration, kind of going back to the key stakeholders, of how to integrate customers into this? So you talk a lot about employees would find some of these key issues, hyperlocal key issues. So can you guys speak a little bit to that?
Hi. So yes, our structure is, we wanted to simplify the structure. And we wanted the structure to be really connected to the communities on a hyperlocal level. Who lives in this community? It's the employee. It's the employee children that go to these schools. So they really are connected organically to the problem. They source this problem, bring it to PEMCO Cares. PEMCO Cares, with the employee, builds this initiative. This initiative's job is then to go out to the community and leverage the resources that are available. So if that is working with other community members, the parents, the schools, the government agencies, that's what that committee then decides upon. Not every problem is the same, so the committee will be different with each case that comes along.
To kind of go off of what Frank was saying, another thing we thought about was the fact that you guys PEMCO has agencies. PEMCO has agencies that deal directly with the customers. So to go back to how do we integrate the customers in the framework? Well, the customers hopefully will build these relationships with the people that they're working with at PEMCO, whether that be your insurance broker, or whoever else is helping them with their claims, and they could say, oh, and that's just a personal relationship building, understanding what your client is facing, what they're going through, and then through that they can bring that again back and be like, maybe my community as an employee, I'm not facing anything in my community, but I know I just spoke to a client out in Portland, Oregon, and they live in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods out there. What can we do about that? And so I think that's how we went about it.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm curious about your definition of hyperlocal, in the sense of the second one you have around, when we're talking about the oil spill and needing a plan for there is a very specific place. But when we look at things like Washington State truancy levels, that's a pretty broad spectrum. And it's a pretty hard topic, because if you look at that topic in particular, like the state truancy levels are big here, but as a national level, it's 20-30% of national truancy is all in Washington State, and it has to do with legal structure stuff. But I was just curious, how does hyperlocal fit a state problem?
Great. So as Mulham mentioned, we're going to start locally. So not all of the states of Washington, all of the counties and communities of Washington face this, truancy. It's actually different from being chronically absent. But not to be politically correct, but these, not every counties and every communities face these problems. So we're going to target these problems at the local community level, and hopefully it will encompass into results that will just build upon each other, that it could even impact the state level.
So to clarify as well, so absenteeism, it's a problem all across Washington State, right? So the problem can apply to many different communities, but what we're doing is we're targeting one specific neighborhood or local, hyperlocal community, and then addressing the problem there particularly. So the problem might apply to a lot of communities, but we choose one neighborhood at a time. Yeah.
What kind of outreach do you have to let the general public and also your independent agents, they're a part of it. How do they participate in this? How do you let them know about this? And what kind of a budget do you have for that outreach?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think one of the points that we really emphasized was creating measurements. Measurements and metrics, that's one of the key issues that we address. And that's because when you have metrics and measurements that really show what kind of impact we actually created, then we can go ahead and we can say, well, in this year, this is what we've accomplished. And that is something that that is a story that we go through that we can then share with the community members, with our independent agencies, with our employees. And that's something that will motivate other people to then understand where we are, who we are, and then get on board. Yeah. In terms of the budget that you addressed, currently the budget for the 5% surplus that's available, that one thing we actually considered doing is, instead of completely giving that all away in terms of corporate giving, that taking some of that and then adding it to the actual structure, and from there you can use those funds to then pursue different initiatives.
Hi. So during your presentation, and actually if you can go back to the slide about the success mentors, that's really what I had a question about. Because in the presentation, it sounded like doing this initiative from scratch. And what was your thought behind having PEMCO create this type of initiative as opposed to partnering with existing organizations, thus making it maybe easier for the employee to just go and do it as opposed to kind of going through the initiative process.
So to clarify your question, you're asking what makes us want to implement this initiative just with PEMCO instead of partnering up with other. Okay, so because insurance is not really thought of, as mentioned, as somewhere, customer friendly, we wanted to really hit home with the CSR brand image of family friendly PEMCO. And by this, because not many insurance companies, zero to my knowledge at the moment, has such programs, we believe that as education is a growing concern in Washington community, PEMCO could be a leader in this field. And hopefully with their successful results and leadership, this could even envision and catalyze other institutions to partner up with us. And yes, we also think of partnership with school agency, local, anything that will really emphasize the PEMCO's value of responsibility, integrity, and courage within the communities we serve.
So to go more in depth into your question as well, you said that we decided to do, this is one of the case studies that we implemented, just sort of if this problem was brought up by one of our employees, right, then this is something that we would tackle. The reason we mention employees in this is because this is a very people-based solution, right? The mentorship program. And so we can really leverage the people that we have, the hours, the Your 8 program that we currently have, we can leverage that. Partnerships are incredible. We think that is very helpful. And that's definitely one of the resources, along with the funding and the people that we have, that we can leverage towards this problem. Yeah.
So I'm intrigued by the program you're proposing, but if I am the CSR manager at PEMCO, I'm feeling overwhelmed. How would I manage this? Do you have a plan on how I would not just launch, but manage it ongoing?
So, first of all, are you the CSR manager?
Not a valid question.
No, well, what we think by building a simple structure is that because we know that the CSR manager and what we assume to be correct in the case is Michelle will then have her agency of people, however large her department is, which we do not have that access to that information. But we don't really want to put all the pressure on Michelle or the manager. This really should come from the heart. Our brand is PEMCO Cares. We want this to be sustainable, most importantly. Firstly, it has to be sustainable. That's why it has to have a brand attached to it, because the employee brings it to it, but nothing guarantees that that employee wants to stick with it forever.
Right, and in terms of like a timeline, I guess, if that's what you're hinting at. So we would envision that, Michelle or whoever's going to step up and take initiative on this would learn the framework herself first. And then we thought of doing these employee subcommittees. So basically the ways to incentivize our employees are up here. It'll be like a PEMCO Cares perk. So some things we thought about were maybe a parking spot for employees that, speak up, bring these initiatives to the table. So of course, it's overwhelming, we understand, but at the crux of it, when you begin, we have this framework for you. If you pick one defined cause, to really get everything right, to work it out, so we outline the education program. It could be anything else, that employees or, even Michelle really values.
And furthermore, we are branding entirely the culture at PEMCO. So yeah, it is our envision. The reason for these incentive programs is so that we can really internally incentivize and reward those employees who are, responsible, who have integrity, and who are courageous to go up to, the PEMCO and say, hey, this is a problem I see. This is what I want to do. So yes, it will take a long time. Changing a company's culture, or any organizational culture for that matter, will be very hard. But once established, we hope that a lot of PEMCO employees can come together with one vision, that PEMCO Cares.
This will have to be the last question.
Well, mine is sort of a similar one. I was trying to figure out if you had thought through sort of the risk associated with this hyperlocal idea. So if you have a hyperlocal idea that you're working on in Seattle, how that engages the employees in Spokane, and I understand, so there may be committees and there may be people who can work this system, but maybe some people are better at working their hyperlocal issues than other people, and so how do you prevent employee disengagement?
That's a great question. So one thing we really emphasize as well is the institutional memory. So if we start an initiative in one hyperlocal community, it's very critical to accumulate the data that we gather from that initiative and really put it into institutional memory that flows all throughout PEMCO's offices and that any PEMCO employee or any PEMCO CSR department can access. And then they can go ahead and use that information that we've collected at one hyperlocal community and implement it in another different hyperlocal community so that it actually bridges and increases engagement within communities rather than disengagement.
Okay, and let's give them a round of applause. So, the fourth place team in this competition from Georgetown University McDonough School of Business.